What I do is I'll just try to present this situation because I haven't done any patient analysis. So, I just try to introduce the concept of evidence-based medicine, and I move over to the systematic reviews, and then meta-analysis and multiple meta-analysis. Basically, what evidence-based medicine is an integration of three components, wherein you have a clinical research evidence and a clinical expertise by the clinicians who they practice, and then patient values. It's an alliance of three components. If you look at the clinical research evidence, it's basically you need to have a proper studies done on those areas so that you can properly diagnose the disease, and you need to have a lot of studies done on proper therapeutic interventions, and it also includes clinicians' experience. Suppose if you go to a doctor, wherein like he has to be able to diagnose the disease as soon as possible so that he can treat in advance. So it also requires a clinician to have expertise in these four areas, and he has to communicate that to the patients basically. So he has to communicate to the patient, and he has to give an opportunity to the patient to decide on what medication that he has to take. So it's basically integration of all these three components. The traditional source of information that a clinician would get is basically textbooks, which is frequently out of date, because there are a lot of science is cumulative. Because every day you find a lot of studies done and it has been published, a lot of journals. Experts, if you go to a doctor, wherein like you go with a condition and you might prescribe some interventions, and if you go to the next doctor and then if you he might provide some other interventions. Each doctor has got different interventions, so they have different opinions. The other way of updating the knowledge is called didactic CMEs, which is not effective in changing their practice because they might have learned through a lot of practice. Like if you're going to CMEs and it's not really going to change their practice. And medical journals are too many. Clinical medical education, continuing medical education. And medical journals are too many, and it has got different qualities in their thing. And if you look at informations, I mean, like in a year you have this many studies published in Biomed Central. Suppose if a person has to keep himself up to date, he needs to read 17 articles in a day to keep himself up to date. So the bottom line here is there are whatever the healthcare is provided, it needs to be like you need to know that which intervention is working, which do not work, and which are likely to be harmful. So even if I go to a doctor, I need to know which intervention is working. Doctor might prescribe some intervention, so I need to be able to understand what intervention is working and what is not working. This is especially important in situations where health problems are severe and scarcity of resources makes it vital that they are not wasted. In countries like India, if you take a snake bite poisoning, if you want to treat them, you need to have anti-snake venom, which is not available in our country. It's less. You need to be more in terms of thinking of resource as well. So evidence-based medicine is in particular relevant to developing countries. And who needs evidence-based medicine? It's not only the healthcare profession who practice medicine, but it's everybody. Even a consumer, even a patient has to know what intervention is working. So this is where the concept of systematic reviews plays an important role. There are a lot of studies available, and systematic reviews basically try to synthesize research. What we do is we try to collect all the studies published in a particular area. Suppose, say for example, malaria is a condition where we have a lot of interventions available. So in US there might be a study done on looking at two interventions, suppose A and B, and then in India you might have compared some other interventions where you say that this intervention is working better. So what we do is we try to collect all these studies published across the world and try to review it. And there is a statistical tool called meta-analysis wherein you synthesize research. So not all systematic reviews use meta-analysis to synthesize data. And here is a situation where is tap water good enough to clean wounds? This is a question raised by systematic reviewers, and there are various solutions used to clean wounds. the conclusion from 5 trials which they have identified, and they say it's boiled cool tap water is as good as other solutions in preventing infection and acute and chronic wounds. So there are a lot of evidence available. So you need to read all these 5 studies and try to identify these 5 studies and try to review it and see that what intervention is working better. So it's statistical methods that combines the results of several independent studies. In general, you will find a outer circle which is a overall review. That could be a review, traditional review written by experts in the field. And a systematic review, the importance of systematic review is basically where they have a proper methodology. Before you do your review, you have your methods written a priori so that you don't mislead by the studies. When you read your studies, you don't mislead by the studies. There are some areas wherein it is not in terms of systematic reviews. Some people might do meta-analysis, whatever studies available with themselves. So the other methods, as I said, it can be a review article, some person personal contact, and they might come to a conclusion by talking to their colleagues. So these are other methods of synthesizing evidence. Why to perform meta-analysis? Meta-analysis basically when you have more number of studies.
Synthesizing, you mean
combining
the number of sources.
Yes. So it increases the power of your studies actually. So basically when you do a clinical trial, you calculate a sample size and you power the study to detect the difference. So when you have more number of sample obtained from different studies, like 5 studies, it increases the power to you more reliable on the information provided by the other studies as well. So next is the improving precision of estimate. It improves your precision, and quantifying treatment effects and the uncertainty. Suppose you might find one study's report effect estimate of 0.95 and the other study might report effect estimate of 0.65. So it tries to combine all these different estimates and come to a conclusion. And it answers a question not posed by individual studies, and it's settling controversies from conflicting studies as well. So suppose the problem here is this is a condition wherein 4 fluoride modalities for preventing dental caries. There is a series of pairwise meta-analysis has been done. So if you can look at this placebo compared to toothpaste, there are 69 studies has been published, and placebo compared to gel, there are 13 studies have been published. There is a pairwise comparison studies already published. The problem is that there is no studies published compared to gel versus varnish. So how do you compute this? This is where the problem arises. So in pairwise meta-analysis, basically what we do is we look for the effect estimate, mean difference and the standard error or variance, and try to pool the results. It's basically a weighted average. Weight is assigned by the inverse of the variance of each particular studies, and you estimate the pool. You find a pooled estimate from all the studies published. So here is the diamond, which is the pooled estimate, and the problem with the pairwise meta-analysis will not answer these questions. Which fluoride modality is the best? There are a lot of fluoride modalities that are available. So what is the ranking of fluoride treatments according to their effectiveness? These are the questions that is not being able to answer by pairwise meta-analysis. And which is better, gel or varnish? There's no studies done comparing gel versus varnish. Here is the concept of network meta-analysis plays an important role. So usually when you're evaluating interventions, we do a randomized controlled trial, and we combine all the randomized controlled trial in meta-analysis of RCT. When you have a direct comparison, we go for a network meta-analysis. Network meta-analysis is in the context of systematic review in which 3 or more interventions have been compared using both. It tries to compare both direct and indirect estimates. That is the advantage of using network meta-analysis. Suppose if you have, why do you use network meta-analysis? For many clinical conditions, several active interventions are available. So here the situation here is over 17 drugs of 5 classes for lowering intravascular pressure in patients with primary open angle glaucoma. This is a condition wherein you have 17 drugs. So what drug you you'll be prescribing, what drug doctors will prescribe, how you know that this drug is working better. So in this kind of situations, we need to go for a network meta-analysis. And head-to-head randomized controlled trials may be unavailable, like varnish compared to gels, and data may not be available. Sometimes you may not find a proper conclusion. The conventional meta-analysis, that's a head-to-head comparison, indirect evidence has not been routinely synthesized. It's not routinely available. The challenge is to rank multiple interventions. So here it's a network diagram wherein like you have placebo compared to toothpaste, where 69 trials compared placebo versus toothpaste, and this is the network basically. There is no studies comparing toothpaste versus gel. So there are methods wherein you can directly, indirectly compare this, estimate this measure, but the problem is when we have a more number of multiple arm trials. Suppose there is a trial comparing placebo, toothpaste and varnish in a single study. So it's kind of becoming more complicated to perform this analysis. So the literature suggests that if you use a Bayesian statistical framework, it is easy for you to account for correlations when you have a multiple arm studies, and it also helps to predict the predictive intervals of estimates, and then it also helps in ranking the probabilities straightforward. So this is my presentation. I haven't done any analysis. I'm new to the Bayesian statistics altogether. I'm here to learn basically. So I don't have any guide wherein like I can just go further. I look forward for some help wherein like I can. Thank you.
Any questions for Richard?
Yeah. Are you yourself doing these Cochrane type trials, reviews, these meta-analysis?
Yeah.
So that's your main topic.
Yeah.
You want to do it better than that. Yeah. And, yeah. So okay. Slightly off-topic question maybe, but there is a source of problems in the medical literature that you didn't mention, which is so recently I was reading this. Some of this book by Ben Goldacre called Bad Pharma, but many people have been writing about this. There's huge bias introduced by the practices of the pharmaceutical industry, and to the point that you can't know which literature to trust and which not to. So you have, 17 trials on some particular thing, but how many of them were paid for, and how many of them are really independent?
There is a method wherein like called grade approach.
Yes.
What we do is kind of meta-analysis, basically try to synthesize results. That's a statistical results. So apart from that, the other thing is that you look at the quality of the studies as well.
Right.
How good the quality has been done. Suppose if it's a pharmaceutical funded trials involved in your meta-analysis, and you try to use a grade approach wherein like you try to see is this a bias to this outcome, and how reliable is the outcome is. So you correlate with that, and there are a lot of guidelines wherein like use meta-analysis, systematic reviews, wherein to come up with some policy making issues. So that is where it plays a very major role in.
Right, if there are no questions, and Richard, Rob.